Oh, I think the Philadelphia Eagles are a legitimate threat. I mean, listen. First of all, the NFC East is highly competitive. Secondly, Dallas is never the lock that everybody thinks they are because we never know what's going to happen with them. Certainly, injuries are a possibility, or dare I say, distractions that could lead to players being ineligible to play. I mean, we have to take that into consideration. Then with the New York Giants, their offensive line and absence of a running game is always of interest to competitors within the division. The Redskins have proven to be the most dysfunctional bunch in the division based on what's happening with their GM, what's happening with their quarterback situation, and how the exodus of Pierre Garçon, Deshaun Jackson, Chris Baker, and others just seem to be happening while Jay Gruden, of all people, gets a contract extension. So that leaves us to the Philadelphia Eagles. Their defense improved mightily under Doug Peterson now that Chip Kelly was gone because you actually had a head coach that paid attention to things defensively and, more importantly, pace of play. As a result, spelling for the defense to some degree, giving them an opportunity to breathe and making them more potent. Offensively, they didn't have much of a passing game. It was ranked 24th. Why? Because you really only had one receiver who was your number one receiver in Jordan Matthews, who's really a number two receiver. And you didn't really have much else to spell for him, even though you had a relatively decent offensive line, even when Lane Johnson went down. So we take all of those things into consideration, and what do? You need more targets for Carson Wentz, who has proved to have tremendous promise as the number 2 overall pick in the draft, who started as a rookie. You go out, not only do you have Jordan Matthews, but you add a Torrey Smith and an Alshon Jeffery, who some debated whether or not he was the number 1, to Brandon Marshall, for crying out loud, when he and Brandon Marshall were teammates in Chicago. This is the kind of potential that Alshon Jeffery has. Plus, he's under a 1-year, $14 million deal, so he's incentivized to go out there and perform because he's going to be looking for a long-term deal himself. Him, Torrey Smith with Jordan Matthews, hoping you get some level of production from the tight end spot with Zach Ertz and Brent Selleck. I would tell you right now, and you're not expecting Lane Johnson to be suspended for 10 games this year on your offensive line, I would say to you that the Philadelphia Eagles could potentially make some noise in the NFC East, and everybody needs to look out for them. Don't ignore them. I tell you that.
The Eagles are a serious threat in the East. They were really missing last year a receiving core, and they addressed that. I love the idea of Jeffery on a short-term deal, and Torrey Smith has stuff to prove, but still, talent. I mean, you have a receiving core now. You didn't have it before. You had an injured and suspended offensive line. I mean, when Lane Johnson they looked really good before the Lane Johnson suspension, and then they totally fell apart. And then as soon as he came back, they looked really good again. How about that? When your best offensive lineman isn't available, you're no good, and then he comes back, and then you're really good again. So you take that into consideration, as Stephen A. would say. If the offensive line is there, they've addressed the receiving core. The defense last year was very good, trending toward elite at times. The quarterback is young and excellent, and looked young and excellent early with some offensive line protection without a receiving core. How's he going to look with that protection and a receiving core? This is a dangerous, young, and improving team. They are absolutely a serious threat in the NFC East.